Forget everything you thought you knew about Yellowstone National Park. There's a deeply disturbing secret buried within its majestic landscape, a forbidden zone that has literally instilled terror in every ranger who's encountered it. We're about to expose the chilling truths they desperately tried to keep hidden. Before we dive into this nightmare, I need your help. We're pushing to hit 1,000 subscribers by New Year's, and we're committed to bringing you daily content just like this. If you're ready to uncover the stories they don't want you to know, hit that subscribe button right now. Let's build this community together. Yellowstone National Park, 2.2 million acres of wilderness sitting atop a supervolcano. But there's something else beneath those geysers, something that's been taking people for over 150 years. And what you're about to hear is based on real incidents that the Park Service has desperately tried to bury. Owen Dalton was 29 years old when he found the file that would kill him. It was October 3rd, one of those crystalline autumn days when the aspen trees turn the mountainsides gold and the air smells like pine and coming snow. Owen had been a ranger at Yellowstone for 2 years, transferred from Yosemite with a reputation for finding lost hikers that others had given up on. His grandmother had worked at Yellowstone back in the 60s, and he'd grown up on her stories. The beauty, the danger, and occasionally, late at night when she'd had too much wine, the things she wouldn't talk about. That afternoon, Owen was reorganizing the chaos of filing cabinets at the Tower Junction Ranger Station when he found a folder that had slipped behind a drawer. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words were clear enough. Lisa Templeton, Ranger, missing since September 27th, 1985. He pulled the drawer out further and found 6 more files, all crammed into the gap between the drawer and the cabinet frame. Someone had hidden them there, or tried to forget them. By the time the sun set, Owen had laid out 7 disappearances on the conference table, all in a 3-mile radius near Specimen Creek. All between September 23rd and October 1st. None of the bodies ever recovered. But it was the incident reports that made his hands shake. Every single campsite had been found intact. Tents standing, fires still warm, food laid out like the person had just stepped away for a moment. And at every site, searchers had found the same thing, a circle of stones, perfectly arranged, about 6 feet across. Inside each circle the grass was dead, not trampled, not burned, dead, like something had poisoned the earth itself. The official reports dismissed the circles, possibly constructed by the missing person, cause unknown. But paper-clipped to the back of Kenneth Price's file from 1992, Owen found a handwritten note on ranger station letterhead. This is the 4th one. Same stones, same dead grass, same time of year. We need to close this area. The note wasn't signed, but someone had written across it in red ink, "Request denied, do not file." Owen's heart was pounding as he reached for the oldest file. Randall Hodges, 1978. Inside, he found a photograph that shouldn't have existed. A Polaroid of Hodges' campsite, and there in the frame, just visible at the edge of the tree line, was a figure. The image was blurry, but Owen could make out what looked like a person standing between 2 pines, absolutely motionless. Someone had written on the back, "Found in victim's camera. Unknown individual. Search team confirms no personnel in that location at time of photo." Owen looked closer. The figure was wearing what appeared to be an old ranger uniform, but the style was wrong for 1978. It looked more like something from the 1950s or earlier. He was so focused on the photograph that he didn't hear Chief Ranger Beverly Whitmore enter the room. "Where did you find these?" Owen spun around. Beverly was 62, with grey hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that had seen 3 decades of Yellowstone summers and winters. Right now, those eyes were fixed on the files spread across the table, and her face had gone the colour of old snow. In the filing cabinet, they were wedged behind a drawer. Owen's voice sounded defensive even to his own ears. 7 people, Chief. Same area, same time of year. And these stone circles, they're in every report. That's not coincidence. Beverly moved to the table with the careful steps of someone approaching a rattlesnake. She picked up Lisa Templeton's file, and Owen saw her hand tremble. When she looked up at him, there was something in her expression he'd never seen before. Fear. Deep and old and bone-tired. "How long have you been a ranger, Owen?" 2 years at Yellowstone, 5 total. Then you haven't earned this conversation yet. She started gathering the files, her movements quick and precise. These cases are closed. The wilderness takes people. That's the reality we live with. But the stone circles are geological anomalies, mineral deposits, underground thermal activity. Beverly's voice had an edge now. This park sits on a supervolcano, Owen. Strange things happen in the ground. You know that. Owen watched her stack the files. He wanted to argue, to push back, but something in Beverly's face stopped him. She wasn't angry. She was terrified, and she was lying to protect him. I need you to forget you saw these. Beverly tucked the files under her arm. For your own good. Some things in this park are better left alone. After she left, Owen sat in the empty conference room as darkness pressed against the windows. He thought about his grandmother, about those late nights when she'd go quiet and stare into her wine glass. Once, when he was 16, he'd asked her why she left Yellowstone. She'd looked at him with eyes that seemed to see past him into some distant horror. There are places in that park that don't follow the rules, she'd said. Places where the world is thin, and if you're smart, you stay away from them. He'd thought she was being poetic, romantic. Now he wondered if she'd been giving him a warning. Owen couldn't sleep that night. He kept seeing that figure in the Polaroid standing at the tree line, motionless, watching. At 2 a.m., he gave up and drove to the 24-hour diner in Gardner just outside the park boundaries. He needed to think, needed to be somewhere with lights and people and the comfortable sounds of normal life. He was on his 3rd coffee when someone slid into the booth across from him. Tucker Hayes was 67 years old, with a face like weathered granite and hands scarred from 4 decades of wilderness work. He was weeks away from retirement, and Owen had always liked him. Tucker was the kind of ranger who knew the park's secrets, the hidden trails and forgotten places that didn't make it onto maps. You found the files. Tucker's voice was quiet, but it cut through the diner noise like a knife. Owen set down his coffee. How did you know? Because Beverly called me at 11 p.m., more rattled than I've heard her in 30 years. She said you'd stumbled onto Zone 7. Tucker leaned back, his eyes measuring Owen. Now I'm trying to decide if you're stupid or if you've got the same disease that got Douglas Finch killed. Who's Douglas Finch? My training officer. Best ranger I ever knew. Tucker pulled out his wallet and extracted a faded photograph. It showed 2 young men in ranger uniforms, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. That's me on the left, 27 years old and thought I was invincible. Doug was 32. October 1972, a hiker named Robert Chen went missing near Specimen Creek. Doug volunteered to lead the search. Tucker set the photo on the table between them. We found Chen's camp on day 2. Perfect condition. Food still out, tent still up. But Chen was gone, and there was this stone circle that definitely hadn't been there the day before. We knew because another hiker had passed through and talked to Chen. No circle then. Doug radioed it in, said it looked deliberately arranged. That was his last transmission. What happened? We searched for 3 weeks. Brought in dogs, helicopters, volunteers from 6 states, never found a trace. But on the last day... Tucker's voice dropped so low Owen had to lean in to hear. I was hiking back alone at dusk. The sun was setting and I was exhausted. That's when I saw him. The diner sounds seemed to fade away. The clatter of dishes, the conversation from other booths, all of it dimmed to nothing as Tucker continued. Doug was standing in a meadow about 100 yards away, perfectly still. I called his name. I screamed it. He didn't move, didn't turn. I started running toward him, shouting that it was me, that he was safe. I got within 50 feet before I understood. Understood what? That it wasn't Doug anymore. Tucker's eyes had gone distant, seeing something 40 years past. He was facing me, but his head was tilted at the wrong angle. Just slightly off, like his neck had been broken and healed crooked. His arms hung at his sides, but his fingers were spread too wide, like he was trying to grab something that wasn't there. And his eyes were open, staring right at me, but there was nothing behind them. It was like looking at a mask. The shape was right. The face was right. But whatever made Doug human was gone. Owen felt cold despite the diner's warmth. What did you do? I ran. Tucker's voice cracked. I ran like a coward and I've regretted it every day since. When I came back with other searchers, he was gone. The Park Service declared him missing. But I know what I saw. Doug didn't disappear. He became something else. Tucker pulled out a small notebook, worn from years of handling. I've kept records, unofficial ones, every disappearance I could track that fits the pattern. He slid it across the table. It goes back to 1872, the year Yellowstone became a park, maybe earlier. We don't have good records before that, but the Crow Indians have stories about that area going back centuries. They called it the waiting place. They said hungry spirits walk there when the season turns. Owen opened the notebook. Page after page of names, dates, and brief descriptions. His throat tightened as he counted. 43 people. Over 150 years. Why doesn't anyone talk about this? Because the moment it becomes public, thousands of people will flock there. Tucker's jaw tightened. Thrill seekers, internet investigators, ghost hunters. The Park Service made a choice a long time ago. Keep it quiet. Try to discourage people from going there, and accept that some will be lost. It's a terrible choice, but what's the alternative? Fence it off and explain why. Tell the world there's a place in Yellowstone where people vanish and maybe never die. Owen closed the notebook, his mind reeling. I need to see it. The area. I need to understand. No. Tucker's voice turned hard. You need to forget this, get transferred to another park, and live a long, happy life. Don't make Doug's mistake. Don't make my mistake. What was your mistake? Thinking I could understand it. Thinking there was a rational explanation. Tucker stood up, leaving the notebook and photograph on the table. There isn't. Some things in this world don't make sense. Some places don't follow the rules. Zone 7 is one of them. Stay away from it, Owen. Please. But Owen couldn't stay away. The next night, after his shift ended, he broke into the park's historical archives. The archives were kept in the basement of the administration building, a climate-controlled room filled with boxes of documents dating back to the park's founding. Owen used his ranger access to get into the building, then picked the lock on the archive room door with a skill he'd learned from a rebellious phase in high school. He started with the oldest records he could find, Nathaniel Langford's personal journals, leather-bound and written in elegant cursive. Owen carefully turned the brittle pages until he found an entry from September 28, 1873. A most disturbing event has occurred. 3 members of our survey team, experienced woodsmen all, failed to return from the Northwest Territories. We found their camp at dawn. The tents stood as if they had merely stepped away for a moment. Their supplies were neatly arranged, their fire pits contained warm coals, but our men had vanished as if plucked from the earth by the hand of God himself. Most curious was a circle of stones we discovered at the camp's perimeter. The stones were old, heavy, and would have required considerable effort to move, yet our men had mentioned no such circle in their previous reports from that location. The Crow guides we had hired took one look at the circle and refused to proceed further. They spoke in agitated tones of old ones beneath the ground and spirits that hunger when the season changes. We attempted to reason with them, explaining that such superstitions have no place in modern scientific inquiry. They departed that very hour, taking their horses and leaving us to conduct the search alone. We found no trace of our missing men. On the 3rd night of searching, one of our party, a Mr. Hayward Collins, came running back to camp in a state of extreme distress. He claimed to have seen one of the missing men, a surveyor named William Cross, standing in a meadow at twilight. Mr. Collins called to him repeatedly, but Cross remained motionless. As Collins approached, he realized that Cross was standing in the center of another stone circle. This so disturbed Collins that he retreated without making contact. When we returned to the meadow the following morning, we found the stone circle exactly as Collins described, but there was no sign of William Cross. I confess that I am at a loss to explain these events. The rational mind rebels against supernatural explanations, yet I find no natural ones that satisfy. Owen's hands were shaking as he turned the page. The next entry was dated October 15th, 1873. We have suspended the search. The men are frightened, and I cannot blame them. 2 more individuals have vanished, both searchers from our own party. Both disappeared at dusk. Both were last seen near stone circles that had not been present hours before. I've made the decision to mark this area as restricted territory. Future surveys will avoid it entirely. Whatever dwells in that place, it is beyond our understanding, and beyond our capability to combat. I am haunted by something one of the crow guides said before departing. He told me, through our translator, that the stone circles are not markers of territory. They are invitations, and once you accept the invitation, you become part of the waiting. When I asked what they are waiting for, he would say only, for the season to turn, for the door to open, for the hungry ones to feed. I have filed my official report with the Department of the Interior, omitting these disturbing details. I have recommended that the northwestern sector be designated as geologically unstable and unsuitable for public access. I pray that my recommendation is heeded and that no others suffer the fate of our lost surveyors. Owen sat back, his heart hammering. The government had known since the beginning. They'd known for 150 years. He spent the next 4 hours going through boxes, finding incident report after incident report. 1889. 2 rangers vanished during a routine patrol. Their horses were found, still saddled, standing near a stone circle. 1901. A family of 4 disappeared while camping. Their youngest child's doll was found in the centre of a stone circle, placed there with care. 1923. 3 rangers disappeared during a single week. All 3 were found by different search parties, standing at different locations, all within a mile of each other. All 3 were motionless. When the searchers approached, all 3 collapsed simultaneously, like puppets whose strings had been cut. They were still breathing, but they never regained consciousness. All 3 died within 24 hours, and the autopsies found nothing wrong with them. Their hearts simply stopped. In 1947, a Boy Scout troop was camping near Specimen Creek. 2 scouts, aged 13 and 14, volunteered to gather firewood at dusk. They never returned. The search found their flashlights arranged in a circle, all pointing inward, all still burning. The files went on and on. Some years had no incidents. Then there would be clusters. 1956 had 4 disappearances. 1963 had 5. 1972 was Douglas Finch. 1985 was Lisa Templeton, a ranger who'd radioed in to report finding a stone circle. Her last words, according to the transcript, were, "There's someone standing in the centre. I'm going to make contact." Owen found a file from 2003 that made him stop breathing. It contained a series of photographs taken by a hiker named Amanda Foster. The photos showed a meadow at dusk, and in each successive image, more figures appeared at the tree line. The first photo showed 2, the second showed 5, the third showed 9, the fourth showed 14. In the 5th and final photo, all 14 figures were facing the camera. The photo was blurry, but Owen could make out details. Different clothing, different eras. One appeared to be wearing buckskin, possibly Native American. Several wore ranger uniforms from different decades. One wore what looked like surveyor's equipment from the 1800s. Amanda Foster had been found 3 days later, catatonic, wandering on a trail 15 miles from where she'd taken the photos. She was hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation and never spoke another coherent word. She died 6 months later. The official cause of death was heart failure, but the doctor's notes mentioned something strange. Her body showed signs of extreme age despite her being only 31 years old. Her organs, her bones, even her teeth showed deterioration consistent with someone in their 80s. Owen photographed everything with his phone, his hands shaking so badly he had to brace against the table. Then he carefully returned the files to their boxes, locked the archive room, and walked out into the cold October night. It was 4 a.m. The park was silent except for the distant sound of the Yellowstone River. Owen sat in his truck and looked at the photographs on his phone, the images glowing in the darkness. 43 people over 150 years, all taken by something in Zone 7. All disappeared between September 23rd and October 1st, the week surrounding the autumn equinox. The time when, according to the crow, the door opens, and it was now October 4th. The window had just closed. Whatever happened in Zone 7, it was dormant now. It would be safe to investigate. As safe as that place could ever be. Owen made his decision. He would go. He would see it with his own eyes. He would document it. And then he would decide what to do with the truth. He spent the next day preparing. He told his roommate, fellow ranger Alexis Cooper, that he was going on a solo backpacking trip to clear his head. She tried to talk him out of it. "Owen, you've been obsessed with those old case files. You need rest, not more time in the wilderness." But Owen insisted. He packed carefully. GPS unit, satellite phone, emergency beacon, extra batteries for everything, a high-quality camera, 3 days of food and water, his service weapon, which rangers rarely carried on patrol but which he wanted now, and Tucker's notebook, which the old ranger had left at the diner like a curse passed from one generation to the next. October 5th dawned clear and cold. Owen left a detailed itinerary with Alexis, including exact coordinates for every planned campsite. He promised to check in every evening via satellite phone. If she didn't hear from him by 8 p.m. each night, she was to call search and rescue immediately. The hike to Zone 7 was 11 miles through some of the most beautiful country Owen had ever seen. The autumn colours were at their peak, the aspens burning gold against dark pines, elk bugled in distant meadows. A black bear crossed the trail half a mile ahead, moving with the rolling gait of an animal fat and ready for winter. For the first 8 miles, everything was normal. Owen's GPS worked perfectly. His phone had spotty service, but occasionally caught a signal. The temperature was in the low 50s, perfect hiking weather. Then, at mile marker 8, everything changed. The shift was subtle at first. The bird sounds faded. The wind, which had been rustling through the trees, died to nothing. The air became perfectly still, like the park was holding its breath. Owen checked his GPS and watched the coordinates flutter and jump. He was standing still, but according to the GPS, he was moving. First he was 300 yards north of his actual position, then 200 yards south. Then the screen went blank for 5 seconds before flickering back to life with coordinates that placed him in Nevada. Owen pulled out his satellite phone. No signal. He activated his emergency beacon. The light turned green, indicating it was transmitting, but he had no way to know if the signal was getting through. The temperature dropped. Owen watched his breath begin to mist in the air. According to his thermometer, it had been 52 degrees 5 minutes ago. Now it read 38 and was still falling. He marked his position with orange flagging tape and continued forward, moving slowly, all his senses hyper-alert. The forest here was old growth, massive lodgepole pines that had been standing for centuries. The ground was covered in a thick layer of needles that muffled his footsteps. The silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, no wind, just his breathing and the sound of his boots on the forest floor. At 3:30 p.m., Owen found the first stone circle. It was exactly as the reports had described. 6 feet in diameter, perfectly round. The stones were old, covered in thick lichen, some of them half buried in the earth. But inside the circle, the grass was dead. Not just brown, dead, completely desiccated, like it had been dead for years despite the healthy grass growing inches away outside the circle. Owen photographed it from every angle. His camera worked, but when he checked the display, the images looked wrong. The colours were too saturated in some places, washed out in others, and the timestamp on the camera kept changing. One photo would be stamped 3:32 p.m. The next would say 6:47 p.m. The next would say 1:15 a.m. He found a second circle 200 yards away, then a third. Then he crested a small ridge and saw the meadow. It was roughly circular, maybe 400 yards across, surrounded by old-growth forest. And scattered throughout the meadow were stone circles. Owen counted 23 of them, all identical in size, all with dead grass inside. In the centre of the meadow was something different, a much larger circle, perhaps 30 feet across. The stones here were massive, some of them 3 or 4 feet tall, and they were carved. Owen couldn't see the details from this distance, but he could see that they weren't natural. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon. Owen checked his watch. It read 4:15 p.m. but the sun's position suggested it was closer to 6 p.m. Time was broken here. Just like the reports said, he should leave. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around and hike out while he still had daylight. But he'd come this far. He needed to see the central circle. He needed to understand. Owen descended into the meadow, his boots crunching on the dead grass. The temperature continued to drop. His breath came out in thick clouds now, and he could feel the cold seeping through his jacket. As he approached the central circle, he could make out the carvings on the stones. They weren't Native American petroglyphs, at least not any style he recognized. They were older, cruder, geometric shapes that hurt to look at, angles that didn't quite make sense, spirals that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. Owen reached the circle at 4:35 p.m. according to his watch. The sun was low now, painting the meadow in orange and red. He had maybe an hour of daylight left, possibly less. Inside the circle, carved into the earth itself, were more symbols. These were fresher, less weathered. Someone had been maintaining them, or something had. Owen knelt down to photograph the carvings, and that's when he felt it. A presence. Not behind him, or beside him, below him. Something was under the ground, and it was aware of him. He stood up quickly, his heart suddenly racing. The air had changed. It was thicker now, harder to breathe, like the atmospheric pressure had increased. His ears popped. That's when his satellite phone activated on its own. He heard it chime in his pocket, felt the vibration. He pulled it out and watched in horror as it attempted to call a number he hadn't dialed. The number scrolling across the screen was just repeating threes. 33333333333. Owen powered the phone off, but it flickered back to life immediately. The call connected. He heard breathing on the other end. Not human breathing. Too slow. Too deep. Like something large was inhaling and exhaling with the rhythm of ocean waves. He threw the phone away, watched it land in the dead grass at the circle's edge. It continued to glow, the screen pulsing with that impossible number. Owen backed away from the central circle, his eyes scanning the tree line. The meadow was empty. He was alone, except he wasn't. They appeared so gradually that Owen couldn't say exactly when he first noticed them. One moment the tree line was empty. The next, there were figures standing between the pines. 9 of them, perfectly spaced, perfectly still. They were wearing ranger uniforms from different eras. The figure on the far left wore buckskin and what might have been surveyor's equipment from the 1800s. 3 wore modern ranger uniforms. 2 wore uniforms from the 60s or 70s. 1 wore what looked like a Boy Scout uniform, far too small for the body wearing it. 1 wore hiking gear from the 90s. And 1 wore the distinctive ranger uniform from the 50s, complete with the old-style campaign hat. None of them moved. None of them appeared to breathe. They simply stood, arms at their sides, facing the central circle. Owen's training kicked in. He was a ranger. These were people who needed help. Maybe they were lost. Maybe they were injured. Maybe they were the missing hikers from years past, somehow surviving in this wilderness. He took a step toward the nearest figure, the one in modern ranger gear. "This is Ranger Owen Dalton. I'm here to help. Can you hear me?" No response, no movement. Owen moved closer, calling out his identification again. The figure remained motionless. When Owen was 30 yards away, he could make out more details. The ranger was male, probably in his 30s. His uniform was clean, well maintained, but there was something wrong with the way he was standing. His weight was distributed evenly on both feet, perfectly balanced, in a way that no living person could maintain for more than a few seconds. 20 yards away now. Owen could see the ranger's face, eyes open, staring directly at the central circle, not blinking. "Sir, are you injured?" Owen's voice echoed across the meadow. "Can you respond?" At 10 yards, Owen could see that the ranger wasn't breathing. His chest didn't rise or fall. There was no misting breath despite the cold. At 5 yards, Owen saw the name tag, Finch. Douglas Finch, Tucker's training officer, missing since 1972. Owen's blood turned to ice. This wasn't possible. Finch would be in his 80s now, if he were still alive. But the man standing before him looked exactly as he did in Tucker's photograph. 32 years old, frozen in time. Owen, his voice shaking now, reached out to touch Finch's shoulder. The moment his fingers made contact, Douglas Finch's head began to turn. It moved slowly, far too slowly, taking a full 10 seconds to rotate 90 degrees until his face was pointing directly at Owen. His body didn't move, his feet didn't shift, only his head turning with a wet grinding sound like old leather being twisted. Finch's eyes locked onto Owen's. There was something looking out from behind those eyes, something that wasn't Douglas Finch. Something old and patient and unspeakably hungry. Finch's mouth opened. The jaw dropped far too low, unhinging like a snake's, and from deep in his throat came a sound that wasn't a voice. It was more like wind rushing through a cave, like the earth itself was breathing out a single word: waiting. Owen stumbled backward, his boot catching on the uneven ground. He fell hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. When he looked up, all 9 figures had turned to face him. Their heads had rotated in perfect synchronization, all of them staring at him now with those terrible occupied eyes, all of them opening their mouths, all of them speaking in that wind voice, overlapping, creating a sound that vibrated in Owen's chest and made his teeth ache. Waiting. The door. Opens. Soon. Join. The waiting. Feed. The hungry ones below. Owen scrambled to his feet and ran. He didn't look back, didn't think, just ran toward the tree line opposite where the figures stood. Behind him, he heard footsteps, not running footsteps, walking footsteps, multiple sets, all in perfect rhythm. The sound of boots on dead grass, all hitting the ground at exactly the same instant. They were following him, but they weren't chasing him. They were walking, maintaining the same steady pace, and somehow they were keeping up with his terrified sprint. Owen crashed through the underbrush at the meadow's edge, branches tearing at his face and clothes. His GPS was useless. His phone was gone. But he knew he needed to head east, back toward the main trail. He used the sun, now almost touching the horizon, to orient himself and ran. The footsteps continued behind him, always the same distance away, never closer, never farther. Just walking with that horrible synchronization, boots hitting the earth like a single massive heartbeat. Owen ran for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. His lungs burned, his legs screamed. He crashed through a stream, soaking himself to the knees, and kept going. And then, suddenly, the footsteps stopped. Owen slowed, gasping for air, and risked a look back. The forest behind him was empty. He stood there, doubled over, trying to catch his breath. The temperature was normal now. He could hear birds again. A squirrel chattered somewhere overhead. Wind rustled through the pines. He'd crossed back out of Zone 7. Owen found his orange flagging tape marking the boundary at 6:47 p.m. Beyond this point, his GPS flickered back to life and locked onto satellites. His watch was syncing with atomic time, correcting itself. He'd lost 90 minutes somewhere in that meadow. He turned to look back into Zone 7 one final time. They were standing at the boundary. A line of 9 figures, perfectly spaced, at the exact point where Owen had crossed back into the normal world, standing motionless, watching him with those occupied eyes. Owen didn't wait to see what they would do. He hiked through the night, using his flashlight and GPS to navigate, not stopping until he reached the main trail at midnight. From there, it was another 3 miles to the Tower Junction Ranger Station. He arrived at 2:30 a.m., exhausted, terrified, and knowing that his life would never be the same. Beverly Whitmore was waiting for him in the parking lot. She was sitting in her truck, engine running, like she'd known exactly when he would arrive. When Owen pulled up, she got out and walked over to his vehicle. Her face in the dome light looked older than it had 2 days ago. "Get in, we need to talk." They drove in silence to a pullout overlooking the Lamar Valley. Dawn was still 3 hours away. The stars overhead were brilliant in the moonless sky. Beverly turned off the engine and sat for a moment, her hands on the steering wheel. "Did you see them?" "Yes." "Did they speak to you?" Owen's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." Beverly nodded, like this was what she'd expected. "Then, you understand now. You understand why we keep it secret." She turned to face him. In 1872, when this park was established, the survey teams found that place, found the circles, lost men to whatever lives there. The government tried to study it in the 20s, sent scientists, soldiers, researchers. 7 people went in. None came out. Their camp was found 3 weeks later. Perfect condition, but the 7 were gone. The Park Service made a decision. Seal it off. Don't talk about it. Don't draw attention. Try to keep people away without explaining why, because the moment this becomes public knowledge, thousands will flock there and we'll lose thousands instead of dozens. Owen stared out at the dark valley. What are they? The things wearing those bodies? Beverly was quiet for a long time. There are theories. The Crow say it's ancient spirits that predate humanity. Geologists say there might be something in the ground, some mineral or gas that causes hallucinations. Physicists have speculated about quantum anomalies, places where the laws of physics break down. She shook her head. But honestly, we don't know. We've been trying to understand it for 150 years, and we're no closer to an answer. How many? Owen asked. How many are standing there? We think 42. Everyone who's vanished in Zone 7 since we started keeping records. They're still there. Still standing. Still waiting. Beverly's voice broke. Still aware. We did thermal imaging from a helicopter 15 years ago. They don't register heat. We drop listening devices. They don't make sounds except when someone enters the meadow, and every year on the autumn equinox more stone circles appear. Like it's preparing, like it's calling for more, like why the equinox? We don't know that either. But it's consistent. Whatever happens, whatever that door is they talked about, it happens during the week surrounding the autumn equinox. The rest of the year, Zone 7 is dangerous, but not actively hunting. During that week, it calls to people. The stone circles appear, and those who see them feel compelled to go to the meadow. Owen thought about Amanda Foster, the hiker who'd taken those photographs. She went back, didn't she? After taking those pictures, she went back into the meadow. Yes, found her 3 days later, 17 miles from Zone 7, completely catatonic. Whatever she experienced, it aged her decades in 72 hours. She died 6 months later. Never spoke a coherent word. Beverly pulled out a folder from behind her seat. Owen, I'm giving you the same choice I've given 2 other rangers who've seen what you saw. You can accept an immediate transfer to any park you want. Full promotion, spotless record, and you never speak of this to anyone. Or you can stay here, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and join the 8 of us who manage this situation, who monitor Zone 7, who try to keep people away, who live with the knowledge that we're sacrificing a few to save many. What if I don't choose either? What if I go public? Then your career is over. You'll be dismissed as suffering from wilderness-induced psychosis. The Park Service will bury you in paperwork and legal threats. And worst of all, you'll be responsible for everyone who dies trying to find Zone 7. Because they will go looking, by the thousands, and that meadow will take them all. Owen looked at the folder in Beverly's hands. He thought about Douglas Finch standing in that meadow for 52 years, something else looking out through his eyes. He thought about the 41 others standing with him, still aware, still conscious, trapped in bodies that wouldn't move or die or age. He thought about his grandmother, who'd left Yellowstone and never explained why. He wondered what she'd seen, what she'd been warned about, what she'd been trying to protect him from. I need time to think, he said. You have until morning. After that, I need your decision. Beverly handed him the folder. Everything we know is in here. Read it. Understand what you'd be taking on. Owen took the folder and got out of the truck. He watched Beverly drive away, her taillights disappearing down the dark road. Then he sat on the hood of his own truck and opened the folder. Inside was 150 years of documentation, incident reports, photographs, witness statements from rangers who'd seen the figures. Thermal images showing the meadow empty despite multiple figures being visible to the naked eye. Geological surveys that found nothing unusual. Native American accounts going back centuries, all saying the same thing. The waiting place, the hungry ones, the door that opens when the season turns. There were medical reports on the 3 people who'd been found alive after entering Zone 7 during the equinox. All three showed the same symptoms: rapid aging, cellular degradation, complete psychological breakdown. All three died within a year. The autopsies found their bodies filled with a grey substance that appeared organic but couldn't be identified. It dissolved within hours of death, leaving no trace. There were photographs of the stone circles appearing. Trail cameras had captured time-lapse images showing the circles manifesting overnight. In the photos, the stones seemed to push up from the ground rather than being placed there, like something underground was building them from below. And there were the testimonies from the 8 rangers who currently manage Zone 7. Each one described their first encounter. Each one had seen the figures. Each one had heard the wind voice. Each one had chosen to stay and bear witness because someone had to, because the alternative was worse. Owen read through the night. When the sun rose over the Lamar Valley, painting the grasslands gold, he knew what he had to do. He found Beverly at the ranger station at 7 a.m. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Owen set the folder on her desk. "I'm staying, but I'm not signing anything." Beverly's eyebrows rose. "Then you're fired." "No." Owen's voice was calm. "I'm staying, and I'm documenting everything, every incident, every disappearance, every stone circle, and when I have enough evidence, I'm going to the families of the missing. I'm going to tell them the truth. Not the press, not the internet, the families. They deserve to know their loved ones are still there." "Owen, that's the right thing to do." He met her eyes. "You've been managing this for 150 years by hiding it. Maybe it's time to try something different. Maybe it's time for the truth." Beverly was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, "If you do this, you're on your own. The Park Service won't back you. We'll deny everything. You'll lose your job, your pension, probably get sued into bankruptcy. And for what? So people can know their loved ones are trapped in hell? So they can know their loved ones are still fighting, still holding on, still waiting for someone to figure out how to bring them home. You can't bring them home, Owen. Whatever they are now, they're not human anymore." Owen thought about Douglas Finch, about the way his head had turned, about the thing looking out through his eyes. "You might be right, but I need to try. Because if no one tries, if everyone just accepts this, then those 42 people are lost forever. And the next time the door opens, more will join them." Beverly picked up the folder and locked it in her desk. "You have 1 year. Document what you want. Investigate what you want. But in 1 year, you either join us officially or you leave Yellowstone." "Those are the terms," Owen nodded. 1 year? He spent the next 12 months becoming an expert on Zone 7. He reviewed every historical document. He interviewed retired rangers, tracking them down across the country. He hiked the perimeter of Zone 7 every week, careful never to enter during the autumn equinox. He documented the stone circles as they appeared each September, photographing them from every angle. He found patterns that others had missed. The stone circles didn't appear randomly. They formed geometric shapes like a vast diagram being drawn across the landscape over centuries. When Owen mapped every circle reported since 1872, they created a spiral pattern that converged on the central meadow. He found witness accounts that had been dismissed. A surveyor from 1889 who claimed the stone circles glowed at night during the equinox week, pulsing with a rhythm like a heartbeat. A ranger from 1934 who reported hearing singing coming from the ground beneath the central circle, voices in languages he didn't recognize. A hiker from 1976 who took soil samples from inside a stone circle and found they contained spores from a fungus that didn't match any known species. Owen collected it all, every scrap of information, every testimony, every photograph. He compiled it into a comprehensive report that was part scientific documentation and part memorial to the 42 people standing in that meadow. He also found the families. It took months of work tracking down descendants of people who'd disappeared decades ago. Some of the victims were so old that their immediate families had died, but Owen found children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews who still wondered what had happened. He interviewed them, recorded their stories, learned about the people who'd been lost. Randall Hodges had been a father of 3, an experienced hiker who'd promised his kids he'd bring them to Yellowstone the next summer. Lisa Templeton had been engaged 2 weeks from her wedding. Kenneth Price had been documenting grey wolves, excited to photograph them in their native habitat. The Boy Scouts David Chen and Timothy Woods had been best friends since kindergarten. These weren't just names in case files. They were people, real people who'd been taken by something that shouldn't exist. Owen made his decision in September as the equinox approached. He would go back to Zone 7, not to investigate, not to document, but to try something no one had attempted before. He would try to communicate with them, really communicate, not as a ranger or a researcher, but as someone who knew their names, who knew their stories, who could remind them of who they'd been before the hungry ones took them. Tucker tried to stop him. "Owen, whatever you're planning, don't. You saw what they are, you can't save them." "I have to try." Owen was packing his gear, preparing for the hike. "Tucker, you've spent 52 years haunted by Douglas Finch, haunted by the fact that you ran. I'm not going to live like that. Running kept me alive." "Yeah, but did it let you live?" Tucker fell silent. Finally, he pulled out his old photograph, the one of him and Doug with their arms around each other. "If you're really going to do this, give him something for me. Tell him I'm sorry I ran. Tell him I never forgot him." Owen took the photograph. "I'll tell him. October 8th. The autumn equinox was in 3 days. Owen hiked into Zone 7 for the second time, carrying a backpack full of photographs and personal items from the families. Letters written to the missing. Wedding rings never worn. Children's drawings for parents who never came home. He reached the meadow at 3 p.m. The stone circles were all present, glowing faintly in the afternoon sun. In the centre, the large circle pulsed with a rhythm Owen could feel in his bones. The door was beginning to open. The 42 figures stood at the tree line. But this time, Owen noticed something. They weren't arranged randomly. They were standing in groups. Family members together. Friends together. Douglas Finch stood next to Lisa Templeton, who'd been his student during her ranger training. Owen walked to the centre of the meadow, his heart pounding, but his purpose clear. He wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He understood now what Tucker had meant about fighting versus fleeing. He called out to them, using their names. "Randall Hodges. Your children are grown now. They have kids of their own. They never forgot you. Lisa Templeton. Your fiancé never married. He died last year, still wearing your engagement ring. Douglas Finch. Tucker never stopped looking for you. He spent 50 years trying to understand what happened. He wants you to know he's sorry." As Owen spoke each name, told each story, the figures began to move. Not toward him, just small movements, a finger twitching, a head tilting slightly, like people waking from a deep sleep. Owen continued, pulling out photographs and letters, reading them aloud, messages from loved ones who died never knowing what happened, words of love and loss and longing. The sun set. The meadow filled with twilight, and the stone circles began to glow brighter, pulsing faster. The door was opening. The figures moved closer, forming a circle around Owen. But they weren't threatening. They were listening. For the first time in decades, someone was reminding them of who they'd been. Someone was seeing them as people, not monsters. Owen finished reading the last letter. Then he sat down in the centre of the large stone circle and waited. The figures approached. 42 people wearing bodies that no longer belonged to them. They stood around Owen, forming their own circle, and slowly, one by one, they knelt. Douglas Finch was closest. He reached out with a hand that shook with the effort of movement. His mouth opened, and this time the voice that came out wasn't the wind voice. It was human, damaged. Barely a whisper, but human. "Thank you." One by one they spoke, fragmented words, broken sentences, but underneath the thing controlling them, the people were still there, still fighting, still aware. Owen pulled out a satellite phone, a new one, and tried to call for help. He wanted to document this, to show Beverly and the others that the missing could be reached. But the phone wouldn't work. The screen showed that impossible number again, 333333333. Then Owen understood. The hungry ones weren't just taking bodies, they were taking time, taking life, feeding on the years these people should have lived. And when someone entered the meadow willingly, with full knowledge of what awaited them, the hungry ones could feed more efficiently. That's why the stone circles were invitations. That's why they appeared at campsites. They needed people to choose to enter the circle, needed them to accept the invitation. Coercion wasn't enough. It had to be a choice. Owen had chosen. He'd walked into the central circle knowing what it was, knowing what would happen. And now the door was fully open. The ground beneath him began to crack, not breaking, opening like a mouth. The 42 figures around him stood as one. They turned away from Owen, facing outward, and as he watched in horror, they began to walk. All of them, in perfect synchronization, walking toward the tree line, walking away from the meadow. They were leaving. The hungry ones were releasing them. But something had to take their place. The door required guardians. The waiting place required watchers. Owen understood now what the trade was. He'd freed them by offering himself. One willing sacrifice for 42 unwilling ones. He thought about calling out, about trying to run, but he didn't, because this was the right thing, the moral thing. 42 people would go home. 42 families would get their loved ones back, changed and damaged, but alive and free. And Owen would wait. The figures reached the tree line and kept walking. Owen saw Douglas Finch turn back one time, and for just a moment Tucker's friend looked out through those eyes. Really looked. He raised his hand in a wave. "Thank you," his expression said. "Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for remembering us." Then they were gone, swallowed by the forest. Owen felt the change immediately. His body locked. His muscles froze. He tried to move, tried to speak, but his body no longer belonged to him. Something else was sliding into his skin, wearing him like a coat. Something ancient and patient and eternally hungry. He could still think, still feel, still see and hear. But he couldn't control anything. He was a passenger in his own body. The thing wearing him stood up, walked to the edge of the meadow, and waited for the season to turn, for the door to open, for the next person to see the stone circles and wonder, for the next invitation to be accepted. Owen Dalton, age 29, became the 43rd watcher. The 42 others staggered out of the wilderness over the next 3 days. They were found by hikers, by rangers, by search and rescue teams. All of them were confused, damaged, aged far beyond their years. But they were alive. They were free. Douglas Finch, who should have been 84, looked 70 and could barely speak. But he recognized Tucker Hayes immediately. They sat together in the hospital while Finch slowly, painfully relearned how to talk. The first complete sentence he spoke was, "The young man saved us." Lisa Templeton, who should have been 67, looked 90. But her mind was intact. She told investigators about standing in the meadow for 39 years, aware of every second, unable to move or scream or die. She told them about Owen Dalton walking into the circle with photographs and letters. Told them how his act of remembering them had weakened the hungry one's hold. The others told similar stories. 30 years of awareness, 50 years, 70, all of them trapped and conscious and unable to do anything but watch as the seasons turned, and more stone circles appeared, and more victims were taken, and all of them said the same thing. Owen Dalton had traded places with them. He'd known what would happen, and he'd done it anyway. Beverly Whitmore tried to organize a rescue. She sent teams into Zone 7 despite knowing it was useless. They found the meadow, found the stone circles, and standing at the tree line, perfectly still, perfectly positioned, was Owen Dalton. They called to him, approached him, touched his shoulder, but he was gone. Something else looked out through his eyes now, something that spoke in that wind voice. Waiting. The door opened soon. Beverly ordered the teams to retreat. There was no saving Owen. He'd made his choice. The families of the 42 freed victims received letters from Owen, postmarked October 8th, mailed from Gardner the morning before he entered the meadow. In them, he explained what he was going to do and why. He told them their loved ones would be coming home. He asked them not to mourn for him. He'd chosen this. And if someone had to stand watch over the hungry ones, it might as well be someone who understood what they were guarding against. Tucker Hayes kept one of those letters. He read it every night for the rest of his life. The last paragraph stayed with him. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who couldn't look away, couldn't let 42 people suffer when I could do something about it. If you're reading this, your loved one is free. Take care of them. Help them remember how to be human again, and tell them I said it was worth it. Every second of waiting will be worth it, knowing they got to go home. The Park Service issued a statement. Owen Dalton had become lost during an unauthorized backpacking trip. Extensive search efforts failed to locate him. Presumed deceased. Case closed. But rangers at Yellowstone know the truth. New hires are pulled aside by veterans and given warnings. Stay away from the northwest backcountry in late September. Don't investigate stone circles. Don't enter meadows where the grass is dead. And if you see a young man standing at the tree line, sandy brown hair, wearing a modern ranger uniform, don't approach. Don't try to help. Just report the sighting and move on. Because Owen Dalton stands watch now. For how long? Nobody knows. Maybe until someone else makes the choice he made. Maybe forever. Every year on October 8th, Tucker Hayes hikes to the boundary of Zone 7. He doesn't enter. He's too old now, and he knows Owen wouldn't want him to. But he stands at the edge, at the exact spot where he marked the crossing with orange flagging tape 50 years ago. And he talks. He tells Owen about the 42 survivors, about how Douglas Finch recovered enough to attend his grandson's college graduation before passing peacefully in his sleep, about how Lisa Templeton wrote a book about her experience, helping other trauma survivors find their voices, about how the Boy Scouts, now in their 50s, still visit each other every year on the anniversary of their rescue. He tells Owen that his sacrifice meant something, that 42 people got their lives back because of him, that 42 families got closure, and sometimes, just sometimes, Tucker swears he sees movement in the trees, a hand raised in acknowledgement, a nod of understanding. Owen can't speak, can't move on his own, but maybe, deep inside the body the hungry ones wear, he can still hear, still understand, still know that he's not forgotten, that someone bears witness to his sacrifice, that someone remembers. The stone circles still appear every September, the door still opens during the equinox, and Zone 7 still takes people who wander too close, who see the invitation and accept it without understanding what they're agreeing to. But now there's only one figure standing watch, one guardian at the tree line, one person willing to face the hungry ones and hold the line. His name is Owen Dalton. He's 29 years old, and he'll stand there for as long as it takes. This story is based on real missing person clusters in national parks, the phenomenon known as Missing 411 documents, hundreds of disappearances that share unusual characteristics. People vanish from areas that are thoroughly searched. They're found miles from where they disappeared, or they're never found at all. And the families are left with questions that have no answers. If this story disturbed you, if it made you think about the price of truth and the cost of sacrifice, help us reach 1,000 subscribers by New Year. We're bringing you daily investigations into the cases that don't make sense, the stories that authorities don't want told. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because the truth is buried deep, and someone needs to dig it up. And if you ever visit Yellowstone, stay on the marked trails, especially in late September, especially near Specimen Creek, because Zone 7 is real, the stone circles are real. And somewhere in that meadow, Owen Dalton is still waiting, still watching, still protecting us from something we'll never fully understand. The door opens every autumn, the hungry ones wait below, and one man stands guard between them and the world. Remember his name, remember his sacrifice. And if you ever see stone circles appearing overnight in the wilderness, don't investigate, don't approach, don't accept the invitation, just walk away and pray that Owen Dalton's vigil never ends, because if it does, if the guardian falls, there'll be nothing standing between us and what waits beneath, nothing at all.